Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask as a unanimous consent as if and to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
All right. Mr. President, I believe Democrats are committed to strengthening our weakening economy by addressing record-high home foreclosures and record-high energy prices. The good news is that we'll pass, I certainly hope tomorrow, the housing bill. Even when President Bush originally opposed the essence of what we were trying to do in the housing foreclosure prevention bill, he has finally dropped his rather stubborn opposition to an important bill and finally realizes, as Democrats have for quite some time, that we have to act immediately to address the housing crisis, not only for the 2 million American homes that could be lost where the American dream gets turned into the American nightmare, but what that means to us collectively as a nation in terms of our economy, what it means to all of us as we've seen by an economy that continues to go all in the wrong direction, what we see in rising inflation costs of essential goods that people and families need, as we see in the rising costs of energy, which I'll talk about in a moment, and as we see in the decreasing values of homes as foreclosed properties within a neighborhood take place, the loss of value of everyone else's home in that community goes down $10,000 or $15,000, and if there are multiple foreclosures, there are even greater amounts of values lost. And those values that are in their homes, which for the average American is the single biggest part of their savings and investments and opportunity to draw from, when that value goes down, the opportunity to educate our children, put them through college, to loan against it, to borrow against it goes down. For having a medical emergency, the opportunity gets diminished. For having that for retirement opportunities, the opportunity gets diminished. So the housing package has so many dimensions to it that is critical to the country. And so we appreciate that the President has finally dropped his veto threat. We'll sign the bill. It will help Americans keep their homes and their home equity. We are restoring stability to the housing market, helping businesses and communities hurt by this crisis not only recover but also create new jobs. And the bill will help prevent another crisis of this magnitude, stop foreclosures before they begin, and preserve for future generations the American dream of home ownership. The nearly 8,500 new families filing for foreclosure each day can no longer wait for help. And that's why it is my expectation in a special session we'll have tomorrow on Saturday that we will get the votes necessary. This will pass and will go on to the President. It already has passed the House. Now, Mr. President, as we talk about saving people in their homes, there's another great challenge for many, not only those who face foreclosure, but those who are working very hard every day to meet their obligations. And in fact, some who have worked a lifetime and find their homes mortgages paid off, but find themselves with the challenges as we look forward in the next several months to the winter season of the consequences of not being able to afford to heat your home. And yes, there are many Americans in this country who face that challenge. So, Mr. President, there will be another critical vote tomorrow, and I certainly hope it is a vote that a majority of this body will support. That is the Warm and Winter and Cool and Summer Act that provides an additional $2.5 billion in LIHEAP funding. There is no doubt that the pain at the pump has been devastating to millions of American families, but we cannot forget also that the skyrocketing price of home heating oil, propane, kerosene, natural gas, and electricity is also breaking family budgets right now, and that pain will only get worse as the cold weather approaches. I'm particularly concerned about this winter, when people will be faced with the prospect of paying $1,000 or more up front to pay for the heating oil they need in the winter. For seniors, for low-income families, for people on fixed income, and those struggling with a poor economy, these enormous upfront costs are simply out of reach. And high energy costs this winter will be severely compounded by our struggling economy. We lost 62,000 jobs in June, the 6th straight month of job losses. Real wages have fallen rapidly. Housing foreclosures are up, while home values, and we've also seen shrinking credit markets, troubled banks, and a volatile stock market. But despite all of these problems, it seems that we have some difficulty getting some of our colleagues here to understand of the necessity of now, the ability to legislate now, and to get this resource available and ready to go so people will not go cold in the winter. Now, despite apparent bipartisan agreement on a whole host of issues to clamp down on oil speculation, minority parties said no. Even though they put that as part of their overall energy packet, they said no. We just saw that in a vote earlier. Despite apparent agreement on pursuing conservation, Republicans have said no to us on pursuing on that, despite the fact that the majority leader has even offered them a vote on the floor of the Senate on their singular issue that we have heard for a week and a half talk about drilling off the outer continental shelf, even though it won't do anything about gas prices, recognized by the Bush administration as such, even though, in fact, it risks the coastal economies of $200 billion on the east and west coast, even though it doesn't do anything about breaking our addiction to foreign oil or even domestic oil, even though any production would take a decade before we saw a drop and 2030 before we'd see full production, even though that full production would be a fraction of what we have seen in reduced demand and increased supply by the Saudis. Even despite all of that, majority leader said, yes, you can have a vote on it. And they couldn't take yes for an answer. So if we're going to divert a disaster this winter, it is time for our Republican colleagues to say yes. LIHEAP is a program we have to help the most vulnerable people in this country stay warm in the winter, and for far too long this essential program has been underfunded. And due to this insufficient funding, the average LIHEAP grant only pays for 18% of the total cost of heating a home with heating oil in the winter. 21% of residential propane costs, 41% of natural gas costs, 43% of electricity costs, and it's only expected to get worse, because this is what it covers in terms of what it has covered. As prices rise for oil and gas and other related products, the reality is that it will cover less and less of a percentage of the costs necessary to be able to keep your family warm. In this poor economy, with a crashing housing market, banks reporting record losses, joblessness creeping up, and the specter of inflation looming, too many people simply cannot make up the difference out of their own pockets. With home heating oil now at $4.50 a gallon, if we don't pass this bill, we can face potential tragedy of an unimaginable scale this winter. You know, Mr. President, these are individuals who work every day, work at some of the toughest jobs in America, important to us collectively in our economy and our society, and yet they struggle to make ends meet. They're not sitting at home, depending upon the public largesse. They work hard every day. Many of them working 2 jobs just to try to make ends meet. but they cannot heat their homes this winter without some help. What does it say to us about our values as a nation? I know the Capitol will be warm, Mr. President. I know the leadership offices here have fireplaces that will be blazing away. No one's going to go cold in the Senate. The question before the Senate tomorrow will be, will we let Americans in this country go cold and have to choose between being able to heat their home and put food on the table? Will those who have worked a lifetime to help build families and communities and now find themselves on fixed incomes be told, oh, sorry, you can freeze? These are not dramatic spectacles of something that will not happen. These are the realities of the challenges if we do not act. So, Mr. President, we ask our colleagues, especially those on the other side, to join us in averting this looming disaster and to vote for the Warm and Winter and Cool and Summer Act. It's finally time to say yes to help those who are struggling the most in this economy. Finally, Mr. President, I want to turn to the third item. We've talked about the housing bill, so critical to our collective economy, to millions of families who either are in the process of losing their home or on the verge of that challenge. Talked about when we keep people in their home, or those who have struggled to be able not to be in foreclosure but can't meet the challenges of heating their homes and their families this winter, what we need to do. Finally, I want to talk about, once again, the question of energy, question of gas prices and what we can do. You know, we as Democrats have been working at this for some time. We want to increase domestic production, the oil supply now, not more than a decade from now, not in the year 2030 from now. That won't do anything to give anybody relief at the pump tomorrow. It's time to put the American people ahead of the big oil companies' bottom line. They've got record profits. We saw that parade start this week with ConocoPhillips. Record profits in their quarter. And I can't wait to see the next set of record profits we're going to hear from the other oil companies. And yet all we hear from many of our colleagues is we need to give them more. Give them more of the federal money, give them more of the federal land, give them more of every break. They are responsible for nothing. They are the only entity that can solve our energy future. It's such a shame, because that's overwhelmingly what you hear. Now, we believe that it's time to put the American people ahead of big oil. We can fast-track domestic production. We've got 68 million acres that, in fact, are already on lease, doubling the lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, accelerating leasing in Alaska, where all the infrastructure is, to a large degree, already, because when we talk about drilling off the east and west coast, there isn't any drilling infrastructure there. Even the president of the American Petroleum Institute said, well, we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the drilling rigs. We don't have the pipelines. We don't have the tanker ports, all necessary to do that. So we're talking about a very, very long time, but people need relief in the short term. And so that's why we've said a couple of things. One, let's end excessive speculation. People sometimes wonder, well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we've got traders buying huge quantities of oil online, intentionally inflating prices. And they turn around and they sell it to other traders at even higher prices. Now, these traders never intend to use the oil. It's not that they're trading it because they're going to end up selling it to an entity that is actually going to disperse that oil. The purpose is to bid up the price and cash in. The problem with that deal is it might be good for the traders and the speculators, but it's terrible news for families who have to pay at the pump. And what is it, in fact, that those who say, well, speculation is really not that important, don't get about this issue? Just yesterday, we saw that the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the regulatory agency responsible to make sure that this area of the marketplace is appropriately regulated, just yesterday they accused a company of making $1 million in illegal profits over the course of 11 days. And how did they do it? Well, in audio tapes uncovered in the investigation, the regulators said that one of the defendants described the scheme as an effort to, quote, bully the market, by making a large number of trades at or near the end of the trading day to move closing prices. And moreover, unlike many other manipulation cases, this one accuses the defendants of actually succeeding in moving prices that were used as benchmarks for consumer markets. A remarkable claim. And so in essence, what they're saying is they did bully the market, and they did manipulate the market. They made $1 million in 11 days, but the worst part of it is that it resulted in higher prices during a period of time for gasoline and crude oil. And guess who paid for that? The consumers of the country. And yet, notwithstanding even this latest evidence, our friends on the other side said no to us on pursuing ending market speculation, having more transparency in the marketplace, having the regulators pursue a course that will ensure that what oil companies' executives testifying before the Congress have said, that speculation can account for up to $50 per barrel of oil. Well, I'd like to take that $50 out of the cost of oil and end the speculation and the type of manipulative trading that is going on, that yesterday the Commodities Futures Trading Commission accused a company of performing and succeeding at increasing both oil and gasoline prices. That's what we had before the Senate, but our Republican colleagues said no. We also believe that releasing oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is incredibly important. This is a reserve. This is a huge reserve we have underground. We buy oil as a country collectively for all of the taxpayers of the country. We put it underground. And what's the problem? Well, it's a good idea, except that we have 97% of it already filled up. We have an excess of a certain type of oil. We're even told by the Congressional Budget Office that if we swap that out and sold a significant element of that, we could do various things. Number one, the taxpayers would make money on it. Number two, we could bring that oil on the marketplace to help burst the speculative bubble and therefore try to bring down gas prices. And number three, we would change the type of oil that we have for a different quantity that we need of a different type of oil. So on all counts, it would be good. And yet, we can't seem to get that done. And finally, Mr. President, we have tried to pursue several times on the Senate floor renewing the tax credits that are critical for us to get out of this dilemma, not just in the short term, but in the long term. We consume 25% of all of the world's oil. Even if we opened up all of our coasts, everything to drilling, we're not going to create more than 2 or 3% of the world's oil. So the bottom line is we're always going to be, if we continue down this road, in a deficit. We're always going to be more of a consumer than a producer, which means to me that for our economy, for our security, and for our environment, we need to break this addiction on oil, whether it be foreign or domestic, and be able to seek renewable energy sources, wind, solar, biomass, cellulosic ethanol. Even T.J. Pickens, the gentleman who made a fortune in oil, is on TV telling us all that we can't drill our way into the type of energy independence we need. So the bottom line is the renewable energy tax credits are what, in my mind, is the most essential, critical element to get these different renewable energy sources into the commercialized aspect with the tax credits necessary to bring them to scale so that we can break our addiction. And yet, we continue to hear no. We continue to hear no. So, Mr. President, it is past time to pursue a strategy of having legislative failure as a way towards political victory. It is fundamentally wrong to have a strategy of just saying no so that this body cannot move forward on the critical issues that Americans face, so that then you can blame the majority party in the body, even though the rules permit the minority to stop the majority from moving forward. Most Americans have always been taught that there is the fundamental essence of majority rule. Of course, in the Senate, because of its procedures, when a single minority member or a group of minority members don't want to allow us to move forward, they threaten filibusters and/or invoke it, and then 60 votes are needed. And since the majority has only 51 votes here of Democrats, we need Republicans to join us. And when they fail to do that, the nation's business doesn't move forward. Now, that's a great strategy for a political exercise if you think that that political exercise is going to bring you victory in November by saying that this body and the Congress cannot succeed on the critical issues that face Americans. But it's a horrid exercise as it relates to the nation's major challenges. Now, fortunately, we've been able to break through this several times. We say that we want to protect and honor the men and women who serve the country in uniform. And it was because of Democrats leading, with Senator Webb and Senator Lautenberg and others, who moved that GI Bill, that even though the President said, no way, too expensive, fraction of the cost of 1 month in Iraq, he said, no way, going to veto it. And we said, no way, we're going to honor the men and women who wear the uniform and take care of them when they come back from their service. That's how a grateful nation ultimately honors those who serve. And because of our persistence in moving through and communicating with the American people, today signed into law the greatest GI Bill investment since the last one, since the first one. A major accomplishment. Tomorrow we will pass this housing bill over the objections of the President, who said, no, I'm not going to sign it. A major commitment to our economy, to restoring the American dream in terms of home ownership and making sure we move in a different direction. So it is time to say yes to the American people. It is time to stop filibustering. It is time to stop to use the powers of the minority in an abusive way. I respect the powers of the minority, but not to be used in an abusive way that undermines the fundamental principle of that majority rules. People of the United States elected a new majority a year and a half ago to move the country in a different direction. A minority who wants to simply show that, in fact, the Congress cannot move in that direction as a tool of political expediency and a tool of political success, they think, is totally inappropriate and, most importantly, damaging to the nation's interests. I hope that starting tomorrow, when we have these critical issues on housing and LIHEAP, to preserve people in their home, to warm those homes, that we can move forward in a way that speaks to the true values of our nation and speaks to the true integrity of this institution. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor